you know, I'll be giving a little bit overview of what is being taught, and then I will be trying to, bring up some other examples which might be missed, which were not covered, but related to those topics.
Okay.
So yeah, because much of those assignment questions will be based on majorly from what's been there in the course or videos present on the web page. So
Okay.
I will try not to deviate from that, but I will still try to bring in new insights from other sides.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a question if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure, sure, sure. Go ahead.
Like generally, like whatever we are discussing in the class right now in the online sessions, we
Yeah.
of week 1 and week 2.
Yeah.
Do you think this is going to help us in the final exam, which is going to be conducted by and you're the board?
Uh so if the I'm not sure about how whether these will be included, the discussion that we'll be having will be included in your final exams or not. That thing is a little unsure, but I think some of the concepts might be included. And the other thing that is with these online classes, I'm trying to do is like I'm trying to cover those concepts, but with different kind of ideas or different kind of inputs or different kinds of perspectives. So this will be helpful, even if it may not be directly dealing with some of those concepts, but yeah, I feel they will be useful.
Okay, so I have a doubt, like a general doubt. Generally, whatever questions we are going to get in the year-end exam, the
Yeah.
course-end exams, is it going to be from the videos which we are getting in the like of the videos which the website is posting us, or we have to read any particular books about the topic?
So I presume it has to be from the classes of basically the videos that are on the web page. And I think you might, I mean, the reading is so that you can have, I feel the reading is so that you can explore more if you're interested. But as far as I have personally seen from the assignments, I felt like the most of the questions should be coming from those video lectures itself. But if you have any doubt, I think you can ask in the question session in that, uh, that web course page itself.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because I'm a little unsure about these things, some of these backend processes. So it will be better you post it there so that it will be helpful for you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah, you're welcome. Just give me just 2 more minutes. I should be starting in a while. Uh, I presume my audio is clear, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, thanks. I hope the screen is visible. The screen is visible, right? Everyone can see the screen. Hi. Can someone confirm whether you guys can see the screen or not?
Yes.
Yeah. Just give me a minute more so that I can finalize it and start. Yeah. Now it's clear, right? Yeah. So let's start. I'm sorry for this being this late and the wait has happened. So yeah, we'll start. First of all, thank you for joining again and being patient. So we'll go over some of those questions from previous session. Okay, and uh, today, along with this week's course outline was majorly on trying to understand how the health risk assessment and environmental risk assessment and life cycle analysis of different pollutants happen. So I thought of after discussing some pollutants, interests and some case studies of nuclear disasters, how they have shaped our understanding how to deal with these nuclear disasters. Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me anywhere or raise your hand or write a message in the chat box so that I can get back to you as quickly as I can. Okay. So coming to the previous assignments questions, the first was about sustainable developmental goal called zero hunger, saying that one of the goals of second zero hunger goal was to promote sustainable agriculture. Yes, it's true. So basically the zero hunger goal says end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. So here, agriculture promoting sustainable agriculture is key uh, to uh, towards ending hunger. So that's what sustainability here represents. And yeah, going to the second question, to ensure proper implementation of goal 6 of the SDGs, which of the following is most pertinent? So here they're asking which of these following three goals is needed for you to implement the goal number 6. So goal number 13 is climate action, which is partnership for different goals. So what is goal number 6? Goal number 6 talks about clean water and sanitation, basically ensuring availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. If you look here, uh, most important of these goals for for implementation of goal 6 is partnering for the goals, because it clean water and sanitations are something that is not cannot be achieved by single you know single stakeholder. So you had to, partner with multiple stakeholders to in order to achieve that. And climate action is also one such goals. But here, for especially for six, we need partnerships. And going on, uh, the question was building of a dam can lead to increasing dash disease owing to stagnation of water. So here we have multiple options of diseases. So as if you remember, what does a dam do? So it blocks a free flowing river, and then creates a huge backwater, right? Where much of the water is stagnated. So what happens? It can also lead to creation of breeding grounds for vectors that can carry vector-borne diseases. If you look at what are the vector-borne diseases of these three, Zika virus is one vector-borne diseases, one of the vector-borne disease, especially mosquitoes being the carriers here. Okay, so going on, a dam height has to be increased because of which of these following reasons: aggradation, re-aeration, and degradation. So aggradation is the answer here because aggradation is a term used generally in geology and then rivers, especially where due to deposition of sediments leads to the elevation or increase in set bed of the river or the elevation of the bodies, water bodies. So if you look at the dams, just behind the dams, because they are blocking huge amount of water, and then most of this water carry silt, especially just post monsoons when much of the water that flows from the land carries huge amount of silt. They eventually stop here. Once the water settle down, the silt eventually reaches the bottom, and it subsequently raises the elevation of the dam. Since the as the dam elevation increases, the water holding capacity decreases. So in order to maintain that water holding capacity, there is the increase in need of increasing the height of the dam. So that is what aggradation refers to. And safety of a bridge on the downstream side of a dam would be compromised due to. So if you have thought of it, aggradation already went there. So we might have just two more options, and which will be re-aeration and degradation. So what happens is uh, when we have a bridge like this on the lower end of the dam, so the force of the water, you know, takes away most of the some of the at least whenever the water flows continuously, it will take some of uh, the building material that is used to build the bridge here. So eventually, after a while, the bridge, might collapse. This is due to the degradation of the stream river bed or the stream bed on which the bridge was built upon. Okay,
So, so to
yeah,
summarize, aggradation happens in the upstream of the dam, and degradation happens in the downstream side.
yeah, yes. And then especially just very close, it's like degradation happens farther also, but the amount of degradation is much more higher at the close end of the dam because the water falls from such height and the water has greater velocity there just at the beginning of the dam.
Okay.
And then and for aggradation just behind the walls or the close proximity from where these gates are there because the water comes and then stops around that point, so much of the aggradation happens close to those areas. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks for pointing it out, the upstream and downstream of the dam, which may be easier way of remembering it. Yeah, and which of the following crops is mostly not used to produce biofuels? So one of the major crops that is used are soybean, maize, especially in the Americas. Maize is one of those crops that is predominantly used for producing biofuels. Sugarcane is also used, but rice paddy is something that is not predominantly used, but recently because of them not being mostly efficient, I presume. And yeah, So yeah, rice paddy is the answer here because if we can find that we can use rice paddy for biofuels, it will be really awesome because we can reduce a lot of other pollutants. The burning of rice paddy that happens in the especially the northern Indian belt, which every year becomes a problem just during winters, especially in the Delhi and NCR region. So, are in the following use and throw plastic alternatives in increasing order of CO2 released in the manufacturing process? So, you have to think it with respect to the manufacturing process. What amount of carbon dioxide will be released? Like leaf products, paper products, and earthen products. So, here are just representatives of each of these. So, leaf products, you basically most of these leaf products are basically collected by hand by people walking into the forest. So there is very minimal amount of carbon dioxide generated during the manufacturing process, and most of these are hand sewn. So there is you can say negligible if you take out the human breathing part. Earthen, so followed by earthen because earthen you are basically taking out the soil, and you had to either when you're digging up the soil you can release CO2, or when you're transporting the soil you can release CO2, or when you are when you have to make the clay to mold the clay into specific shape, you have to have this wheel rotating. So you can use a manual wheel, or some if you use a mechanical wheel for which the energy comes from some sort of CO2 generation. So compared to paper products, earthen products, have little higher CO2 release during manufacturing. And paper, we all know that although documented as sustainable alternative may not be as sustainable as we think of. Because for it to manufacture, you have to cut down trees, get get them down to the manufacturing units, then make a pulp, and then get it again, mold it. So yeah, the correct order will be something like this. Leaf will be smaller, earthen materials or earthen products are medium, and then paper products are a little bit higher in this order. Uh, as of 2023, India has achieved the use of petrol blended with dash percent of ethanol and will start supplying petrol blended with dash percent of ethanol by April 2024. This is more of a what India is opting to do. Yeah, so India is opting, by by this year, it has achieved 10% of fuel used by some of those biodiesel or biofuel vehicles and ethanol. So it's not like you're using pure biofuel or entirely ethanol. You're blending it with petrol. And yeah, the disease caused by nanoparticles entering the brain is so Kaposi's sarcoma, Parkinson's disease, and bronchitis. So if you look here, sarcoma is a skin-related disease. Bronchitis is a disease related to lungs, and Parkinson's is a disease that is related to the brain. So if you look here, so yeah, so Parkinson's disease is the answer here because when when you inhale or when the nanoparticles enter your body, if they end up in the brain, so they can block off, they can aggregate in the brain and then cause damage to dopamine producing neurons and then lead to disease, which has which the disease has some other symptoms also, and yeah, can lead to Parkinson's disease. Okay, so yeah, that's about nanoparticles and Parkinson's. So whereas in bronchitis is basically there is an increase in amount of mucus on the inner lining of the walls of bronchi due to inflammation also. So Going ahead, so there is this lengthy question. A suitable adsorbent must be chosen for application of capturing CO2, a potent greenhouse gas from industrial emissions. These two materials available are either nanoscale silica particles of 50 nanometers or nanosilica particles of 50 micrometer size. Okay, so what they found out was, are, although they are of different sizes, they both have similar adsorption capacity. So adsorption is different than absorption. Adsorption is just happens onto the surface rather than and going reaching into the molecule. Keeping in mind the impacts of nanomaterials discussed in the lecture, which would be a better choice towards meeting the sustainable goals. Whether it is 50 nanometer nanoscale silica particles or 50 micrometers. So we had to this because we were discussing that smaller size small nanoparticles have much more greater effects on us because they end up everywhere in the body. The obvious choice will be to go for the larger scale particles because the performance is the same. If the performance would have been different, then would have been a dilemma to choose better performance versus environmental friendly. But here we know that the performance of 50 nanometers versus 50 micrometers is the same. So we'll go for the one that is larger. So which is larger? Micrometers is larger. If you look at the scale here, nanometers is 10 to the power of minus 9, which is very like 1,000 times smaller than micrometers. So we should choose 50 micrometers given they have both similar amount of adsorption capacity. Okay. Uh, so these were the 10 questions that were in the previous assignment. Hope some of those explanations were clear. Some of those were direct explanations, so I didn't spend much time. If you're not clear on any of those, I can specifically explain them again. If you're okay, I can go ahead. If you're okay, yeah, just let me know that you are okay with this so that I can move ahead. You can drop a message or react.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Thank you. Uh, okay. So since if you have watched the videos of this week or week two, basically, so here most of the lecture was covering uh, life cycle assessment and environmental risk assessment of different type of pollutants. So one of the major pollutants that is rising because of the way we humans are is radioactive pollution, right? Uh, so especially in this in this age where each country is striving to become a nuclear power by having nuclear weapons and so on. So understanding that thing might be little little I thought it will be little interesting to have what happens. uh, so I think all of us know what is a pollutant, and let's just go over it again so we can define it as a substance that doesn't belong to the environment. That's as simple as that. Or in some instances the substance is already present in the environment, but you are not bothered about it. It becomes a pollutant when it's present in higher than normal quantities or in a different place where it's not supposed to be there. Okay, so what does what some of those examples? So let's go over some of them. So nitrous oxides, it can be NO, NO2, NO3, ozone, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide. All these are present, in environment in some quantities. But because of us, we are changing the amount with which they are present, especially the carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, and then these are causing some other effects, mainly acid rains or global warming. So all these things. So these are also pollutants. It's not like they are not there. They are there, but we are increase. They are present currently in huge quantities. Heavy metals like lead, arsenic, they can be present in the ground or they can be present in air. Radioisotopes like cesium, radon, zinc, or uranium, all these radioactive elements. Organic compounds like herbicides, insecticides like DDT, and plastics. All these are all pollutants. Some of them doesn't belong to the environment. Some of them are, introduced by us. Some are already present, but are present in huge environments, thanks to us. So let's talk about radioisotopes, or yeah, radioactive pollution. So you can simply define radioactive pollution as, you know, something as simple as radioactive materials present. When the radioactive materials are present in an environment, either released through accidentally or intentional release, and pose a serious threat to the environment. Okay, so why do they pose a serious threat? If you remember, radioactivity is the character of some elements where they undergo decay. So they basically release ionizing radiations, which are basically comprised of alpha, beta, or gamma, or some other particles when they decay, because these are unstable. And then these ionizing radiations are what are the source of the effects these radiation causes. Okay, why are these radioactive pollutants generated in the first place? These are naturally available. So most of these radioactive elements, if you have heard from a periodic table of elements, more, they are naturally present in Earth on Earth. But we also use them, for multiple uses like X-rays, CT scans. Those are medical uses. We use it for generating energy, especially in terms of having nuclear power plants and showcasing the country's strength. We have nuclear weapons. So you have multiple uses of these radioactive elements or the property of radioactivity. But we all might have heard that radiation is harmful. But is it really harmful? Or is it like the only radiation we encounter? So we also encounter radiation on a natural basis from the environment, which is termed as background radiation, which is present across, which is generally doesn't cause much effect to our human body or any other organisms as such. But what happens is, but the way some of these uh, nuclear meltdowns or nuclear nuclear war will lead is like they put up huge amount of radiation into the atmosphere, and then that is harmful. So why this radiation is harmful to us? So as I was saying, these radiations release ionizing radiation. So radioactive materials, when they decay, they release ionizing radiation. So what does this radiation causes is that they ionize the atoms, which affect the molecules, because cells are essentially made up of these, and affects tissues and eventually affect the whole body, right? So they affect at the subatomic level or the atomic level, which cause cascading effects that will grow across and affect the whole body of the organism entirely. And there are different effects. So the direct effect, which all of us are aware, is basically the radiation will damage DNA or some other cellular components that are critical for the survival of the cell. Like it can damage the cell membrane or some other processes. It can interfere with electron transport system, which is crucial for getting energy, or ATP synthesis, something. If it has a direct effect on the survival of the organism, it is termed as direct effect. Or while it can also have an indirect effect. For instance, as we are just speaking, it affects different atoms and different molecules. So when radiation interacts with water, what does it do is, since water is H2O, it breaks the H2O into OH minus and H plus ions.
And then when these are formed, they can eventually come back and form H2O, or which is what it was earlier and doesn't affect. Or sometimes it can form H2O2, which is oxidizing agent and then damage the cells like crazily. So, and which may lead to cell deaths also. So there is an indirect effect of radiation also. So yeah, hope this these are a little clear. And the effect of radiation can be acute or chronic, and also with respect to time spent. So short time, high dose, long time, low doses. So yeah, they can be classified based on these also. And the radiation effects also are affected, you know, either they can have genetic effects or somatic effects. So what will happen if radiation alters the genetic makeup? So especially if it alters the reproductive cells, it leads to mutations in reproductive cells. The damaged reproductive cells will be passed on to offspring, and is the offspring of the exposed individual that is suffered because of this radiation. While somatic effects, basically the effect is suffered by the exposed individual itself. Like if he has been exposed to radiation, if the person is exposed to radiation, especially on the upper body, like lungs, so he might have some damaged lungs or something like that. But if much of these reproductive organs were affected, so reproductive cells would have mutated, which if they have an offspring later on in their life, so the mutations might cause genetic defects in the offspring. So it can have direct effects and then indirect. So a direct effect on the individual itself, or can have on the subsequent generations also. So sometimes you might feel that you're not having any effect on it, but you will see the result in the offspring because of the radiation. So is it like all, if I'm just exposed to radiation, does it affect me or not? So the simple answer is doesn't, because most of us have might taken X-rays or CT scans at some stage, but you're still alive because the dose that we are subjected to, the level of radiation we're subjected to while getting our medical examine was not higher. It's kind of very little. So what dose is higher? So what is the amount of dose that is necessary for an organism to die? So we express that in terms called lethal dose, called LD50. So basically, LD50 is a term that is especially used in medical term, or yeah, where they use this method to say that this concentration of this specific, uh, it can be a pollutant or it can be any other organic molecule or any other anything, but it's basically the exposure at which the concentration of the exposure of whatever the thing that you're trying to look at kills at least 50% of the population. It's like if, let's say, for example, you have been exposed to uh, 50 milligrams of some antibiotic, and 50% of the population, like 100 individuals, if you injected 50% or more than 50 like individuals died at 2 mg itself. So then you call that as LD50. So basically, at least 50% of the population is killed. You stop at 50. Yeah. So most of these tests are done with respect in especially animals that are similar to that of humans, like mice, monkeys, or macaques, because they have this closer representation to how our human body functions. Because due to ethical reasons, we might not favor testing these things on the humans itself, right? So we have to use some other things as surrogate to what what we can test these on. So generally use lab mice or hamsters or monkeys. Okay. Coming back to radiation, uh, so which organisms should have higher LD50 for radiation, or basically the organisms that can uh, have higher can survive in higher amounts of radiation without getting affected. What do you think? Uh, Please, if guys can guess,
Mammals?
mammals should have higher or lower. So if you arrange them in an increasing order, let's say, uh, uh, so LD50 increases here, high, low. So where do mammals fall in? Yeah, please. Someone raised a hand. Please go ahead. Yeah. Any guesses? If you are not comfortable answering, you can type in the chat box also. It's okay if you don't understand it. I can explain in later if you don't guess it right also. Okay. You guys take a few more minutes to guess until I answer. Uh, yeah, hi Vibhav. Yeah, most of this will be available on, I think, on the main web page itself, and then these recordings, these online sessions are being recorded and they will be uploaded on YouTube at this location under this account. If you want, you can access them here, and these presentation and the link to the subsequent YouTube link is also being uploaded onto the web page, so which is present on the main course page where you can access it from online section 2023. So if anybody wants to access the presentation that I'm using and the discussions we are having, they are also recorded. So yeah, you can access them at the later time also. So any guesses on
Can you like explain it once more, the concept?
of LD50?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens in LD50 is uh, just a minute. So you make a plot. You subject, let's say we take 100 individuals. Okay, of, let's say we are saying lab mice are taken for understanding uh, different things. So we can plot you know concentration on x-axis of whatever thing you are trying to test. Okay, and then the proportion of individuals dying, okay, at that specific concentration. So let's say we have 50 here and we have 100 here. Okay, so the plot will look somewhere, it will start rising, because if there are some lower level of concentration of whatever substance. Let's say we are looking at some antibiotic or yeah, some chemical. At lower levels, our body will not be that much affected, right? As the concentration of the chemical increases, the number of individuals that die also increases. So if you do this multiple times, you might reach something like this. So after a certain concentration, all of your individuals will die. So you call, okay, so this is where all of the individuals die, this concentration. Instead of that, what you do simultaneously, additionally, is you try to find the concentration where 50% of the population dies. So 50 lethal dose. Lethal dose is the dose at which the organism dies. So since we are looking at 50% of the a point where 50% of the population is dying, we are calling it lethal dose 50. Right? This is prominently used for some for some compounds. You might need to use lethal dose 25 itself because of the nature of the compound itself. For some compounds, you might need to have LD 75 or LD 100 values, something like that. Okay, so that's how we find out. So we can have 100 mice injected with let's say 2 milligrams of that thing, like 4 milligrams, 6 milligrams, 8 milligrams, and 10 milligrams, something. These are arbitrary numbers. So we can have a plot like this and then decide. So this point as where 50% individuals are dying.
So for like all the substances, the lethal dose can be like LD50, it can be LD25 or
It
something like
depends. Yeah,
that.
yeah. So generally, most predominantly LD50 is something that is generally used. Okay. So going with this, so just what I asked was, which organisms among these three classes will have higher levels of LD50? Like, I'm asking whether mammals will have this or this one. So where the LD50 is much more higher, like 6 grams here, or it can have something like this, or it's 9 grams. I'm just asking which will mammals belong to. So if mammals are higher, they should be here. Bacteria lower, they should be here. Insects in between, so they will be here. So I was asking, where do you put each of these? What do you think they should belong? Where do you think they should belong to?
This question can also mean that the entrance of these organisms for this particular type of radiation.
Okay, let's say they're exposed from outside, or whatever possible mechanism you can expose them with. Let's say let's go with the simple one where they're exposed from outside, like they're like X-ray machine. They are kept in front of X-rays. I completely agree with your point. The mode of entry is really important, especially when it comes to radiation. Okay, let me just go a little ahead because I felt yeah. So, so this is a graph where you can see this as 0, right? 10 to the power of minus 4 is 10,000. So these are measured in, uh, sorry, yeah, this is acute lethal dose called GY. I'm not sure what this term is, but yeah. So if you look at in terms here, the mammals are the ones that have smallest amounts of LD50 compared to bacteria and viruses. Insects have a wide range. Some insects can tolerate higher levels of lethal doses, some have lower. Relatively, mammals, if you in the order we are talking about, mammals are low, followed by insects, followed by bacteria. So low to high. So it's not men in black, it's mammals, insects, and bacteria. So yeah. So you may be wondering why. Can any guesses come in? Why do you think mammals have higher, insects in between, bacteria higher? Sorry, yeah, mammals lower and bacteria higher. The dose. So what does this mean is basically at lower exposure levels to radiation itself, mammals are affected, lethal dose. So they will die. Compared to the dose at which bacteria will die is relatively higher. If no one has any guesses, I will go ahead. Or if you have any guesses, just drop what you think.
The size, does it have some kind of contribution? Because like at the end of the spectrum, the size of the organism is relatively lower.
Yes. So if you look here, the size consistently increases, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so size is something that is really important in scaling because the volume, the amount of cells that are there is also major contributor to the effects it's shown. Like for it, along with that, if you look at the individual effects, yeah, yeah, the size is a really important factor here. Okay, it comes in terms of the volume the organism occupies. If you put up in terms of each organism in terms of their volume, so mammals have relatively high volume and then larger body size, so they tend to have lower LD values compared to bacteria. So going on, let's talk about this Fukushima Daiichi nuclear accident, which most of you might have heard of or at least read about because it's in news recently again. So what happened here is it's in Japan, Fukushima, close to Tokyo, which is the capital. And what happened was somewhere around 2011, March 11, there was a tsunami, there was an earthquake that happened here. So what it led to was it led to a tsunami, and this tsunami caused a lot of loss of life in Japan in general, and then it also caused the collapse of defense wall that was built here. If you can see, there is a wall that is breached here. So this is the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear reactor or the nuclear power plant. So it's not like they have not taken any precautions. So they know the, you know, there's a chance of tsunamis, but the height of those tsunami waves are much more taller than what the defense wall was built for. So it breached the wall and then flooded the whole reactor. Although they had these early warning systems, they shut down the reactors to reduce, the effect, the destruction it can cause. But this breach lead to, flooding of these reactors and the fuel pumps that helps cool the reactors down. And then it led to a nuclear meltdown. So the reactor and the coolant, some reaction happens, and then it leads to release of nuclear material outside that body it's contained in. And there are a lot of investigations that has happened. So what they found out was that the Fukushima is a man-made disaster. It could have been avoided. Okay, it's not like it just happened because of natural calamity. It happened because of man-made, decisions. Some of those decisions which were or the precautions that we're supposed to take were not good enough. So what the government did. So this is what the area looked like. So this is the center of uh, the place where this power plant was. And after the tsunami and the meltdown, so because of the nuclear fallout that happens, so these are the areas that which living in those places gets is not possible because the nuclear waste or the nuclear radiation is still present in those areas. So yeah, this is a map showing that where all it has happened. So what Japan has done, so it found out that this reactor has melted, so they had to contain it from spreading it outside of those complex. So what they did was, since this most of this thing has contaminated with the groundwater and the rainwater, so they diluted that thing and then they started storing most of this radioactive water in underground tanks, overhead tanks at the plant. If you can see, there are a few residential complexes, and then The remaining are just storage towers for the radioactive water. So recently, what happened was they had run out of space where to store much more water. So what they decided was we'll treat this water, try to reduce the radioactivity level, and then release it back into the ocean, so that ocean can help us reduce the radioactivity by further diluting it, so on so on, which has hoping for the ocean to help with dilution, which has led to a huge outcry because if this radioactive water is released into the ocean, it will cause it will contaminate the water. It will cause, it will affect the fishes. When we eat those fishes, it will eventually affect us again. And these all these cascading events. So all of these were discussed, and then there is a huge outcry saying that you can't do that. But still, Japan went ahead with this plan and started releasing consequently. So yeah, that's Fukushima because there's this dilemma. The original plant was built for generating power, electricity, and then providing it for the good. But what has happened because of the tsunami was they had to stop that production, and then it went out of it was commissioned out. Whatever the radioactive waste was there, the pollutants. Now they are planning to do it again to release it back into the environment, which is where they had to assess the risk of what will happen if I release the water into the radioactive water into the ocean. So how, what all taxa will be affected, what will not, how will affect the humans, how will it affect the ecosystems present there. So all these things they had to take in consideration before doing this. And similarly, another famous thing was Chernobyl accident, which most of us have also heard of it. So some in 1986, so Chernobyl is here, which is close to Belarus and Russia. So this accident happened in 1986 before the Soviet Union, which Ukraine and Belarus were part of, Russia were part of before they split up. This huge nuclear reactor, you know, due to some faulty design in the reactor and then some human error in with respect to the operators led to a meltdown of the reactor when they were trying to shut it down. So this caused the largest uncontrolled radioactive release into the environment, and then this release went on for over 10 days, and people were evacuated from these regions so that they are not exposed to these radiations. Somewhere around 14 EBQ of radioactivity was released. That was the estimate, of which most of this radioactivity was uh, from inert noble gases, which doesn't have much effect, but some of them are radioactive compounds. So what happened was once this has happened, so they immediately try to contain this release of radioactive materials, and then they build a confinement zone, and then so that they can contain the radioactivity there and there itself. Although they had measures to control it, but the time or the scale that which it has happened was very huge. So it has affected humans, ecosystems, anything, and every one present in that area, each and every other thing present in that area. So this is one such, this is a photo of one of those places, one of those small towns, which was abundant just within days of the accident because they were supposed to relocate, and this is in called nuclear exclusion zone. So even today, if you look at this Chernobyl here, so there is some radius from the Chernobyl reactor is the area, it's called Chernobyl nuclear exclusion zone, where no one is allowed into that area except for people who are responsible for keeping, you know, trying to measure how, trying to understand how this place is with respect to radiation level, how safe it is. And recently, people have started it as a tourism from, because these are how things have happened here. The tourism industry has also boomed recently in this area. So what happened here with respect to organisms? So because we are not the only people who were excluded from this zone, because there were some forest areas that were also considered as the exclusion zone. So there are wildlife that was also surviving in those areas. And there was no negative influence of radiation on mammals, on the number of mammals that were present in that area. And they found that, interestingly, they found that this radiation is not, all the wildlife that are surviving in these areas with higher amount of radiation, they are not having any evidence of stress due to this radiation. They feel like they are just as if they were home, just without humans. And even some of these areas have come to support uh, wildlife that are very rare to see outside and are in very few numbers. So these exclusion areas have been found to have unique sanctuary for wildlife, because humans are not there, human related activities are absent from that area. So whatever has happened, it's like we are not bothered by them, we are just bothered by your presence. And these animals are are just enjoying the absence of humans from those areas.
Why it didn't affect the other organism, wildlife species?
So yeah, so here they were looking at these papers, they were looking at you know abundances of species, yeah, or which might might not affect sometimes, or the other thing might be those mammals by inherent are might be much more resilient to those radiation. I'm just guessing, I'm not sure what's the case with that, but it's really interesting when you find out, you read that the animals are just going about their businesses as usual, and even some of those very critically endangered species are surviving there. And just it's just the absence of humans, that's what is helping them survive there. It's really interesting I mean, to see how these are even in the radioactive waters, where much of these radioactive effluents are discharged, even fish populations are surviving. Vibha, you're saying something. And yeah, it's not like none of the organisms are affected. There will be some taxa that were affected, but since it's much more easy for us to study mammals, or the ones that are larger and stuff. So in some of those regions, some of the plants are really affected. So some there's this huge die out that has happened in some of those regions. So it's not like the effect is nothing. So there is effect, but these areas have become a unique sanctuary, because these animals might not be staying close to those reactor where the radiation amount is much more higher. They might be staying in those a little far away from the reactor where they are, yeah, I, they are somehow trying to find out that that place is not good, this is good. I presume that's what might be happening.
So, like human activity is more detrimental to the species than that radioactive activity.
Yeah, yeah, that's what it felt like here. From what people have found out, it's like if human activity is not there, even animals can do well even in the absence of humans, even in presence of other
Like
disturbances.
in the case
The-
of like COVID pandemic, that quarantine time also like
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it has much more, many more similarities with that in that aspect. So yeah, so just think about the influence we as humans have on organisms. It's so much. So yeah, so how do these radioactivity affects or is how humans are exposed to radiation? So some of the radiation, if it's dropped in sand and sediment, if you're consuming the plants that are grown in these areas, so you'll be ingesting them. Some of them can be external radiation. Okay, either through contaminated cloud or air, or from the deposits, or yeah, mostly either you ingest directly from food which have been grown from contaminated areas, or you're visiting to contaminated areas, or contaminated air can expose you to irradiation. So what is the scenario of India with respect to power plants, nuclear power plants? Because so if you look here, most we have some already operating power plants and few that were proposed power plants for generating electricity. So we have around 22 operating ones that are under operation, some 8 around construction, and one that has been shut down. Although there are 22, most of these are small scale power plants. They don't generate the huge amount of electricity that nuclear power plants in other places or other regions generate. And the total amount comes around uh, somewhere around 1.1% of primary energy that is generated. So which is very small amount. But since there is proposal to include nuclear energy to as a sustainable form of energy to to meet some of the sustainable developmental goals, uh, India is trying to increase the percentage of energy it generates from nuclear and shifting from coal to this type of energy basis. But there are issues that just comes up with it, like you know as we are discussing, there is always a chance of nuclear fallout or basically nuclear meltdown of some of those power plants, or there is always a possibility of enemies trying to target some of those nuclear power plants so that they can have greater control of the situation. Or yeah, so it's such a dilemma now, considering what we plan to achieve with respect to sustainability, and then versus the other side of the coin of nuclear power. Hi, Vibhav. Yeah,
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but can you provide the link of this transcript after the session?
this transcript link, it's there on the. It will be there on the web page itself. On the. I mean, you want the video or you want the presentation?
Like both, because actually I'm outside now, so I'm just listening to you, so that whenever I'm free, I can make notes out of this, right? So for that reason, I'm
Yeah,
asking.
sure, sure. So you can visit on the YouTube channel. There, I will upload in another half an hour once from after at least half an hour after the class ends.
Yeah, thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Welcome. So yeah, it's for us to decide based we had to outweigh like what are the benefits or what are the drawbacks of having nuclear power. You guys are if you have any ideas or if views of nuclear power, whether it being good or bad, please feel free to share your views. Uh, Anybody? If not, yeah. Even currently, even for some of those proposed nuclear sites in nuclear power plants in India, there have been protests, going on for considering the risks people have learnt of. But some of these accidents are really really low. If you look on the positive side of having nuclear energy, they are really low. They're highly efficient in terms of the amount of pollutants are relatively less, but the pollutant type is higher. If you look at in terms of the damage the pollutant causes, at least the waste after the spent nuclear fuel has to be disposed of very safely. There are procedures to dispose spent nuclear fuel, like you have to put them in special structures, we make special structures for them so that this nuclear decay or radiation doesn't pass through them and then affect anybody or leak out. So there are a lot of considerations that had to be taken, and then the local people, especially because in case of any tragedies regarding the nuclear power plant, so those people are the ones will be mainly affected compared to people that are staying far away and then trying to enjoy the benefits of nuclear power and saying we want nuclear power but not close and trying to understand the effects of nuclear power.
Without the tragedy even happening, like
Hmm.
the area close to the nuclear power plants, will their quality of life will decrease without any tragedy happening itself? Only the existence
Mm,
of the nuclear power plant itself, like degrade the quality of life of the people nearby.
uh, should not happen. It should not degrade without any such tragedies because uh, I think having a nuclear power plant itself, brings up a lot of opportunities for people around. I feel like if you think, but it's like having a commercial estate coming up nearby and then you opposing for it. You can think of it in terms like that because there's always a possibility of that happening because there's a whole settlement that comes up with it that because people who had to manage the power plant who are responsible for the safety who are running other things, so all those people had to stay close by, right? So there's a conflict that might also arise, but yeah, it might also improve quality of life in some occasions because you know since these are made in sometimes are made around remote places. So for a nuclear power plant to be made, it has to be, you have to need to have greater connectivity, greater, lot of other things. So all those facilities will surely come, but it depends on how which angle you view it from. If you view it from a local, yeah, it might be different.
Like there is a lot of stigma around like the quality of water, like chemical radiations and all, especially
Yeah,
among the elders and all. Uh,
yeah.
it's like
So
will
yeah, I think
will it have any effect on the like groundwater or like the water
so.
bodies around it?
So it depends if the radioactive water is being released into a stream that that eventually percolates, then it will have an effect on the groundwater. The radiation will seep into the groundwater. If they're contained properly and then they treat the water properly and then release the water, then because much of this thing happens if you remember coal powered plants. What happens is you burn the coal, you heat the water, you make steam, you rotate the turbine, and then you put out once the steam cools, you put them out in cooling ponds so that it cools, and then you can reuse or release back into the river. So similarly here, it's also steam powered, but for heating up the water, you majorly use, you know, the reaction that happens when these atoms, decay. So that water, if it's contaminated, if it's released back, it will cause issues. But if you take proper care, you can reduce the levels, but it's not like you're removing it entirely. And we have to we had to put up this understanding of, there is some background radiation that on an average humans are subjected to, and then this is what is tolerable for humans. If this is not, if this is about this level, this will cause, it will affect humans in certain ways. So these all the things that has to be put forward to the people, and then yeah, I think then only they might be willing to think of the positive side. It's not like if you try to obscure those negative aspects, once they find out, it will be a little crazy situation. But I think if that, I feel it's like we start with showing the both benefits and the other side also, saying that, okay, these are the things that are risks involved, but we are planning to take these measures. If this happens, we have these measures in place. So that assurance might help. That's what I feel.
Yeah, like, but this issue of like nuclear power plants is like much more stigmatized. Like for the Kudankulam nuclear power plant, uh,
Yes.
there have been a lot of protests from the natives, uh, like opposing this construction of the power plant. So that's why I asked. Like there'll
Yeah.
be no like much negligibly little difference between the area in a nuclear power plant and the area where there is no nuclear power plant,
Yes.
considering the
Yes.
quality of human life, right?
Yeah. So you're asking, you ask a question, or is it like you're just saying that?
Yeah, I'm no, I'm just like making saying that.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's a really interesting dilemma, which I think we don't have. We are not having much discussions as a country in these recent times. I feel because it's a while it's one of the way of achieving those sustainable goals instead of trying to import much of those fossil fuel based energy from outside. Or the other thing that we look out for is dams, which are like the easiest way to build. So yeah, these are different things we have to think of. So yeah, that's all for today, I feel. But anybody has anything, please let me know, or we can talk for a while if you have any comments or anything. If no, we can, yeah, we'll end the presentation. Yeah, we have reached the end of the presentation. If you have any doubts, do let me know, or else we'll stop here. So, yeah, I think, and nobody has anything, in which case we'll stop here.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you so
th-
much.
yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining and asking those interesting questions. Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
sir.
you. Bye.